Hi there. Okay, so gifted people and other neurodivergent people talk a lot, or it's a common theme, common characteristic. They have a strong sense of justice. That's something that I have lost. I don't quite have that and resonate with that description the same way that I probably used to. I actually really did have a strong sense of justice when I was a kid. I also really had a strong desire to learn how the world works, right? So I really was fascinated by the world, and I understood kind of the complexity of the world, and like, whoa, there's, you know, basic stuff like there's so many countries. It takes a long time to like fly from one side of the US to the other, and that's like pretty small on the globe. So like the globe, the globe must be huge. And when I was growing up, there were 7 billion people. That was like the stat. How many people are there? There's 7 billion people. I was like, whoa, okay. That's a shit ton of people, right? So I was fascinated with understanding how the world worked. And of course, being a gifted person, this is another really common characteristic. I was fascinated and had lots of ideas about how the world could be better, right? Making the world better. It was so quick for me to, and I'm talking about like as a kid and like as kind of an early teen, as soon as I learned about anything about the world, I was like, okay, let's make that better. Like, let's improve that. I can see how to improve that, and we can get to work. Like, let's go, right? And I think I was a little bit sheltered in that way because adults would like kind of encourage that and be like, yeah, yeah. But like, I could tell they were a little bit disillusioned and like, cause they weren't really getting on board with a lot of my ideas, right? And so now I'm that adult, right? So I'm that adult and I'm like, oh, yeah. Somewhere along the way, I learned the lesson that the world is the way it is on purpose. The broken parts are features, not accidents. And that sucked to learn. I don't remember having like a moment where I learned that, but with a pattern recognizing brain, you can kind of start to piece things together. Certain powerful people doing wrong and getting away with it, and then poor people doing the same thing or way less, like smoking weed or something in like the mid 2010s. Poor people, black people, disenfranchised groups going to jail for like much, much, much less than the insanely disruptive and destructive behaviors of the upper class, right? So I'm like, okay, I get what's going on here. Learn a little bit more about American politics. And it's like, okay, well, the Republicans are doing this and the Democrats are doing that, and it kind of seems like they're in opposition around major issues. But the more and more that I learned about that growing up, it was like, actually, they're kind of on the same team a bit, where the people in power want to stay in power, right? So oftentimes when push comes to shove and they have an opportunity, members in that class of our society have the opportunity to do something that would actually help the quality of life of individuals in the lower classes, and then they don't consistently, then it's like, okay, again, I understand what the priorities are here, and it's not just, and hasn't been for a very long time, is what I can tell. So to me, pursuing justice on a national scale is kind of something I've given up on, to be honest, like personally. And I struggle with that sometimes, as horrific things are happening to the people around me. And I understand that I have a high degree of privilege because those horrific things probably aren't going to happen to me. I'm not gonna get targeted by an ICE agent like going to the store to get groceries, right? So I understand that. I do. And we can maybe talk more about that a bit later. But I've been working closely and learning more about people that kind of come into my sphere in the gifted realm. So these folks are highly intelligent, they're highly driven, they're highly compassionate, they're very sensitive, but they see solutions. And a lot of them have individual, isolated projects that they are very sold on, is how I would say that. And they have a vision for how can I make the world better, which is like they have a core, being gifted, like they're the same as me. There's a core drive to make the world a better place, right? And so a lot of them have found something in the world, usually a big thing, like it's kind of like a grand idea, and they've decided to go for it. And it's like their main thing, which is great. Like, I love that. I will say that I don't have that anymore. I kind of had a phase where I did have an idea for like, how am I gonna use all of my talents to make the world a better place? And it wasn't very grand. It was like that. This was my baseball era of, in my mind, I was like, I can legitimately help a team, like a baseball team, gain a massive competitive advantage and win a World Series, which would bring a lot of joy, like a ton of joy to the fans of that team, which is, millions and millions of people. So that was kind of my way of contributing. And when that went south, when I realized this doesn't bring me joy, this doesn't bring me energy, I don't want to do this anymore, and there are much bigger fish to fry, there are much bigger ways I could contribute, that's when I kind of stopped thinking that there was this like big, massive thing that I could do to help. I understood that there were bigger issues, but then I was like, oh, I actually can't do anything about those issues. And that brings me to this next point, which is, the more I've learned about the world, the more I've understood that our problems are systemic in nature, right? This is not new. I'm not breaking news on this, but the systems that we have, especially in the United States, especially in the year 2025, they are just bad. Like, there's kind of no other way to put it. And this is something I actually learned and had experience with when I was working in the baseball world and in corporate America. When you join a job, let's say you join a team, and there's a stated goal of, here's our goal. And in this case, it was like, we want to win baseball games. And I'm like, okay, cool. I want to do that too. So like, let's work on this together. And the longer I worked in this role, the more it became clear that they had already had kind of a lot of discussions, a lot of decisions that had been made before I even showed up. And I saw that those decisions and those discussions were not going to work. They are not going to lead you to the World Series. Like, it actually was kind of like a world crumbling down around me type feeling, like a my heart dropping into my chest type feeling. I was like, oh, there's already a lot of momentum and going in this direction, and that's not a direction that's going to work, I'll tell you right now. And so on a much larger scale, that's what I'm seeing in society in general. And that feels bad to say, and I don't think I've ever even said that out loud or admitted it to myself. But the truth is, it feels like I was born into a society and a time and a place that is fairly doomed. And I do want to explain more what I mean by that, because that is a big thing to say. And I mean something specific by that. But it feels like our systems cannot be salvaged. It's the same feeling as, I'm taking stock of whatever the fuck is going on in our society. And I'm not just talking about like Trumpism, which is clearly awful and not good for the health of, the vast majority of Americans. But I'm talking more broadly. And I actually don't know like when, if I had a time machine, I don't know when I would go back to like get back on a timeline that actually makes any sense. But it feels like the sense I get as a living person in this era is that we are so far in the wrong direction that it's like, why try? Why try anything? Because it just isn't working. I'm not talking about Trump getting elected. I'm not talking about like Ronald Reagan and modern conservatism. I'm not talking about capitalism being invented. I think it goes before that. I'm not talking about colonialism, though that was bad. I don't think that was a good move for the, humankind. But maybe it goes back to like agriculture. So here's my larger kind of, not theory of everything, but my larger, like almost like spiritual stance. I believe that as a human in 2025, that I am not built to live in a society that even resembles this. The more I've gotten in touch with my psychology, my nervous system, my body, it's clear to me that the way that I was designed, the way that I evolved, the way that this individual would thrive the most would actually look 0% like the life that I actually live. And that's another thing that I haven't actually said out loud. The food we eat is basically poison. I think the water we drink is fine, so that's cool. We need shelter. In any version of me would need shelter. 12th story apartment building with probably 10,000 other bodies within like 1,000 feet of me, or let's say like a quarter mile of me or whatever. That's not natural. So the food we're eating, not natural. Sitting down, a sedentary lifestyle, not natural. Even like lifting weights, not natural. Going on walks, I love going on walks, okay? But my body now, having been alive for 26 years, is not where it could be in terms of health. And I'm not saying this isn't a body image thing. This is like, I'm not going to show, but like my feet are all crunched up because I wear shoes all the time, right? Like I have like less body hair in certain places where like I'm always wearing clothes, and the clothes rub on my skin and I don't have body hair in those places. I'm sure my hormones are all messed up from the things that I eat and my lifestyle. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. Is like, as I know, I've only known this society, right? I'm a 26-year-old guy. I was born in 1999, right? So society has looked generally the same way since 1999. But I'm also a member of like the human consciousness. When I sit down for a meal and close my eyes and take a bite and taste, a big bite of chicken, let's say, unseasoned chicken, that's the same experience that the human consciousness has had while eating chicken for thousands and thousands of years, right? So it's in those moments where I'm like, this consciousness has seen so much, and this consciousness is not satisfied, is not happy with this current lifestyle, with this current way of being. And I can only imagine that there was at one point in the past, maybe it was the far past, before civilization even, that this consciousness would have been singing, like just the whole time would have been like, this is what I was meant to do, right? We talk about animals, right? Like a wild animal. That's what we are, right? Like we're wild animals. Like it seems like I should be using my intelligence to like cook up a better plan to like hunt buffalo more effectively. Like me and the homies, we're hunting every day. Maybe we have huge muscles because we're hauling, bison meat across the prairie, right? We're spending time in connection with each other. I have a role where I'm like feeding my family and, whatever the thing is, right? It's probably historically being a man. It's like it was probably hunting. It was probably killing. It was probably being aggressive, but maybe there was a role in like rituals. Maybe there was a role in bringing up children, mentoring like the men of the tribe or whatever it is, right? People say, humans are social animals or humans are tribal creatures, tribalism, right? That to me seems more like a better fit for humanity. And yes, there are things that are great about modernity, but the way I see it is we have traded meaning and our essence as animals, basically. We've traded that for a longer lifespan, but with that is not satisfying and is not meaningful, basically. Maybe, someone from a different generation who hasn't, grown up in Gen Z and seen like complete disillusion of all of our systems and authority, maybe they would say it was worth it to trade our kind of animalistic, more tribal ways of being and, join a civilization that does meet our external needs in exchange for like a little bit of labor. So that's an argument. I'm open to that. But it seems to me, I'm kind of wrapping back around. It seems to me that our world is filled with injustice, and it's filled with, quite honestly, horror and horrors. That if I was in charge, like if this was a video game, if this was a simulation, I'd say, we got to hit the reset button. Like we got to go back. We got to do something differently, because whatever is going on right now is really not working. Really not working. And so it's an interesting question then. If you find yourself as a consciousness, a fraction, a fractal, some people say, which I don't quite understand, a fractal of human consciousness, and you find yourself in this situation where you are essentially on you're where we are, our society, our humanity has been mutating the way that I am picturing it. It's been mutating and growing and growing and exponentially growing with each new generation or each new birth, even creating a larger strain on the system, creating more problems, right? These things are like exponentially growing, these problems. And so if you find yourself in that spot, I actually don't think that it's logical to engage with the system. And that's hard to say. Again, I understand this is coming with a lot of privilege, because there are people out there who are also fractals of the human consciousness that are just getting run over by the runaway train, right? So that is awful. But if you have the ability to spend a fraction of your life, or let's say your whole life, working on a fraction of the problems in our system, is that the best use of a life? To, I'm picturing, putting a Band-Aid on an Ebola patient, right? That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to complain about injustice, or to even be worried about justice in general. It's like the system, the honestly globe is infested, and it's stage 6. It's gonna die. It's gonna need a reset, right? And I'm gonna die, right? I have no illusions about, well, if I work hard enough, if I find the right solution, then maybe I'll be able to, extend my life or whatever. I'm like, this is what we got. This is where we are. I don't really hear a lot of people talking about this element of being existentially aware within a completely failing society. At a certain point, I think I made a decision at some point to go inward. And because even if the outside is crumbling, I am humanity, right? All of us are humanity, individually. And so the more I can learn about myself, the more I can understand about humanity, and maybe the more that maybe that leads to humanity understanding more about itself. And to take it a step further, consciousness understanding itself, right? So if we take a look from that spiritual lens, that we are just consciousness, right? We are, sometimes people say, infinite beings having a finite experience, something like that. If the goal of consciousness is to experience itself, that is when we can go inward and we can experience ourselves, and we can experience the world as it is without needing the world to change. I'm more or less accepting powerlessness externally. And doing so has actually really allowed me to feel empowered internally, because every time something happens, every time something external happens, I now am seeing it as an opportunity for me to meet, whatever comes up with love and curiosity and warmth, and to go, wow, this is the experience. This is the experience of grief. This is the experience of being conflicted. This is the experience of feeling like there's injustice and there's nothing I can do about it, right? And I think that's beautiful. And I hope that if I can come to understand pieces of my psyche and pieces of my humanity and share that with others, then that hopefully makes it more likely in the future for other humans to be able to do the same thing. And maybe I can help push humanity forward in that way when it comes time to like rise out of the rubble, basically. So it's kind of a feeling of like, what would you do if you were on the Titanic and it's sinking? Would you scramble and try to survive? Let's say you're a man, right? And they say women and children on the boat, women and children on the boat. And you're like, okay, fair. You guys do your thing. Like, I hope you guys survive. But in that moment, it's like, okay, I'm not going to be living that much longer. And I guess there were men in that situation who like were using their last moments to kind of help others and help, maybe if I can't survive, maybe someone else can survive, right? I think the analogy there in this case would be me spending my life researching other systems that like I'll never actually get to see, like society-wide systems. And then maybe someday someone reads my research paper and says, oh, maybe we could try this, 500 years in the future or whatever. But it just, so, I take that, but I'm like, if I was on the Titanic, I think I would notice the chaos and see that I'm a part of something that's happening that I can't even quite understand and that I certainly can't control. And like, take some deep breaths until my time is up. That's what's feeling true for me right now. And I think that says a lot about like how I'm living my life and how I'm responding to societal wide collapse, more or less, and certainly failure, as with some sort of like apathy. Or I don't know if it's apathy, but it's a detachment for sure that I have. And so bringing this back to justice and injustice, like we're so divorced as humans from what we should be doing. Like, it makes sense that no one is enjoying their experience in this setup, basically. Obviously, some people are enjoying their experience. I'd argue the people that are enjoying their experience are living the most similarly. They're getting their needs met the most similarly to if they were in some sort of a tribe. Like, they probably have a strong community. They probably are experiencing some sort of connection, some sort of romantic connection, which even that and like monogamy is something that to me seems completely made up. They probably feel like they have a purpose. They probably are working towards something that they think is meaningful, which is, kind of my like hunting example, right? Maybe they're using their unique skills to like achieve some sort of outcome that helps the people that they care about. But ultimately it's like, it feels like the society we're in is designed, well, I know for a fact it's designed to keep us dissatisfied so that we will more easily submit to forced labor, whether that's manual labor or more commonly, I guess, in my experience, for a person like me, kind of more of white collar labor. But that's the truth of what it feels like to be myself. And so I'm like, yeah, like that's what it is. Like it is what it is. And I certainly am not happy with it, but I also feel like there's nothing I can do about it. I'm thinking right now, something just came up about the something starfish, like the happy starfish or something. And it was the idea that it was like a parable. You can look it up, but in the face of things that are really big and dark, we can still make small moves that help individuals. And that's certainly true. And that is what I'm doing with my coaching. I am working with individuals and helping them in their pockets of the world. But yeah, that's where I've been lately. I think I've accepted the state of the world and the fact that I can't choose what happens in the world during the 70 to 100, hopefully 70 to hopefully 100 years that I get to be alive and conscious. And I'm choosing to do a lot of introspection at this phase in my life. Feels like the kind of the beginning phase of my life, because it doesn't seem like much else is meaningful to do, to be honest. It feels like that's kind of one of the only meaningful things that I can possibly do with this time I have.